Great Demon King. Chapter 55. A Change in Status. The other wolf rider, upon seeing Han Shuo rush over wielding a longsword, forcefully widened his eyes beneath his furry forehead. He roared furiously, his speech halting and unpracticed in the common language. Tricky humans you are. Looking for death. His voice trembled with both anger and disbelief, as if he could not fathom the audacity before him. The giant wolf beneath his legs howled in unison with its rider's rage. In a desperate response, the orc wolf rider whipped out a crossbow from behind him, raised it with determined fervor, and fired a bolt toward Han Shuo. The crossbow bolt whistled with an ear-piercing sound as it sliced through the air, homing in on Han Shuo's neck. With his magical yuan churning rapidly within him, Han Shuo focused his concentration to an almost meditative degree. In his eyes, the sharply whistling crossbolt appeared to slow down, its speed distorted like the slow-motion scenes from the movies he once watched with fascination. In stark contrast to the bolt's seemingly lethargic pace, Han Shuo's perception was sharp and unyielding. When the crossbolt had traveled to about a meter away from him, the longsword in his hand abruptly thrust out. It struck with unerring accuracy at the head of the bolt. A sharp crack resounded as the crossbolt exploded into pieces, its remnants scattering harmlessly in the air. Even after shattering the oncoming crossbow bolt, Han Shuo's speed, although still maintained on the back of the battle steed, remained unaffected. Before the wolf rider could muster the strength to fire a second bolt, Han Shuo had already raised his longsword and surged in front of the wolf rider with a determined urgency. A cold arc of the blade flared out from Han Shuo's right hand as he wielded the longsword. Despite its solid, heavy nature, in his grip the sword felt as light and graceful as a feather. The orc wolf rider, taken aback by the sudden offensive, also raised its sword. Just as the two swords were about to clash with violent force, a smaller brown crossbow bolt suddenly emerged from Han Shuo's right sleeve. The bolt whooshed past the orc's longsword, its path swift and precise, and it sank into the wolf rider's neck with a soft, almost imperceptible sound. Treachery. The wolf rider's voice emerged in a guttural cry, its mouth frothing with bloody bubbles as it struggled to speak. With evident difficulty, it managed to utter the word before its strength ebbed away. The heavy longsword in its hand caused its bulky frame to falter, and it fell off the back of its enormous wolf. It was immediately clear that the orc wolf rider was dead, a race with low intelligence indeed. Han Shuo's previously stern and cold expression dissolved into a trace of an evil smile as he stepped to the side of the fallen giant wolf. In one swift, practiced movement, he flicked his longsword, sending the large bag attached to the giant wolf's body, shooting out toward the battle steed behind him. Then, with a forceful downward slash, his sword struck the agitated wolf, whose head was brutally pulverized, and the giant beast toppled in a heap of lifeless bulk. Amidst the ensuing chaos, a wave of figures suddenly materialized from the corner of the northern street. More than 10 wolf riders howled loudly as they desperately chased a band of mages and warriors. Among the fleeing group were Beecher and other light major students, riding on inferior battle steeds, their expressions a mixture of fear and determination. Hurry and go. Han Shuo immediately reacted after pausing momentarily. He lifted the reins in his hand, and the battle steed trotted out with dull, hasty clops as it changed directions once more to charge toward the north. The urgency in his tone was unmistakable, a call to leave before more dire consequences could unfold. Fanny and the others, having witnessed Han Shuo's fierce, dog-eat-dog performance, understood that the situation was dire. They too urged their battle steeds to follow behind, their voices edged with anxiety as they directed their escape to the north. Han Shuo's crew, propelled by his commanding presence, made their way to a large canyon after half a day's worth of frantic galloping on the backs of their horses. The canyon's steep sides loomed over them, and at its end, a vast river stretched out with azure waters that shimmered in the fading light. Han Shuo and his companions reined in their battle steeds at the canyon's end, gazing at the river as a sudden quandary settled over them. This should be the Empire's Niralan River. We can make our way to the city of Balthazar in the southern part of the Empire after crossing the Niralan. Balthazar City and Zajaski City aren't too far apart. Although it's not as heavily fortified as Zajaski, it surely has a robust guard. I think we'll be safe as long as we can make it to Balthazar, Han Shuo said, his tone measured as he surveyed the vast azure expanse. Jean creased his brow in thought as he studied the river's width, then suddenly spoke. In order to make it to Balthazar, we must cross the Niralan River first, but this river is so vast. I think we'll be unable to make it across without a ship ferrying us." Fanny's face was itched with anxiety as she sighed while gazing at the expansive waters from afar. Han Shuo didn't speak further upon reaching this point. Instead, he became absorbed in rifling through the 2 large bags on the battle steed. The shops in the town of Droll were designed for adventurers and mercenaries, so they mostly sold goods necessary for battle. Han Shuo took inventory and discovered that from the 2 bags looted from the wolf riders, there were 4 crossbows with more than 10 bolts of the highest quality, 3 high-quality daggers, 2 longswords and mage staffs of ordinary quality, and 3 sets of leather armor designed to be worn close to the skin. In addition, there were a few bottles of healing medicine and various poisons. After carefully selecting the sharp dagger with a sapphire embedded in it, Han Shuo concealed it close to his body. He then methodically put away the bottles of various poisons, and finally emptied the contents of the bags onto the ground. Raising his head, he looked at everyone and said calmly, "Put these things away and prepare to fight." At that moment, the necromancy students and teachers, who had been silently deep in thought about potential strategies, suddenly looked up at Han Shuo's words. Jean paused and recalled Han Shuo's earlier performance, exclaiming in surprise, "Brian, did you use the bone arrow magic just now?" His question rippled through the group, causing everyone except Fanny to stare at Han Shuo in shock. Lisa even squealed in fright, pointing her right finger at him with a face full of incredulity, questioning, "That's right. Brian, how can you use magic?" "This isn't the time to discuss such matters. A portion of the orc wolf riders is headed this way. I think those damned wolf riders will reach here quite soon. We have a canyon in front of us and the vast Nirolan River beneath us. What we should do now is consider how to handle the orc wolf riders that are about to arrive," Han Shuo said calmly, as he neatly arranged the weapons from the bags, his tone measured, and his eyes fixed on the approaching threat. "If it wasn't for you leading us to this forsaken place, how would we be in such dire straits?" Bella glared at Han Shuo disdainfully, her voice filled with cold derision. His brow furrowing, Han Shuo's calm face grew cold as an irrepressible sense of disgust and disdain welled up within him. He lifted his head to look at the mocking Bella and said, "Do you mean my decision was wrong?" His tone was measured, but his eyes burned with an icy determination that silenced her immediately. Bella, taken aback by the sudden severity in his gaze, resembling the predatory stare of jackals and wolves, smiled fearfully and stammered, I didn't mean that." Nodding, a faint smile returned to Han Shuo's face as if nothing had happened. "Since that's the case, everyone, pick your weapon. Our mental strength is limited, and the casting range of magic isn't as far as that of crossbows. I think we should first rely on our weapons, and when those prove useless, then use magic to attack. Come on. Let's make some preparations and wait for those wolf riders to meet their fate." His voice was steady and commanding, and his words cut through the panic like a clarion call. Han Shuo's performance, though it might have originally seemed comical given his status as an errand slave for the necromancy major, had now taken on a different tone. After witnessing his berserk behavior in the dark forest and his previous cold, ruthless killing of the wolf riders, none of his companions found it amusing anymore. Instead, his actions commanded respect and a hint of fear. It was as if they were all getting to know Han Shuo anew. Even Fanny and Jean came over docilely and began to select crossbows from his outstretched hands. No one dared raise any objections in defiance of Han Shuo. Unbeknownst to everyone, the original errand slave Han Shuo had, in that moment, established authority among them, causing them to willingly heed his directives.